Number 3 on this list was a shoe store machine that aimed X-rays directly at a child's growing feet, used dozens of times a day without a second thought. Number 18 was a pill a doctor could hand a healthy pregnant woman that would not reveal what it had really done to her daughter for another 20 years. And number 25 was so ordinary, so trusted, that when it was finally pulled from shelves for good, an entire generation's bedtime ritual disappeared with it. 25 items, every one of them gone from pharmacy shelves forever. If you had a grandmother who swore by the tonic in the cabinet, or a grandfather who remembers the fluoroscope at the shoe store, you already lived through more of this list than you realize. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next video, because we're just getting started on bringing back the everyday America nobody bothered to write down. Number 1. Benzedrine inhalers. Introduced in 1932, a simple nasal tube packed with amphetamine-soaked cotton to shrink swollen sinuses fast. What most people don't know is that Benzedrine inhalers sat right on the open shelf, no prescription needed, well into the 1940s. College students and truck drivers alike cracked them open for a jolt, not a cold. That sharp menthol sting, a quick reach into a coat pocket, the hiss of a nose clearing on a Sunday morning. Your grandfather kept one close, right next to his cigarettes. The Food and Drug Administration restricted Benzedrine inhalers to prescription only in 1949. It wasn't caught for being dangerous. It was caught because too many people had figured out how to get high off a decongestant. The next item wasn't hiding in a coat pocket. It was sprayed straight into the kitchen, and it belonged to every housewife in the country. Number 2. DDT household spray. Introduced to American consumers in 1945 and sold as the miracle that finally beat back flies and mosquitoes for good. What most people don't know is that DDT was sprayed directly onto kitchen counters and children's bedrooms, marketed as being safe enough for daily household use. Rachel Carson's warnings were still years away. The rattle of a pump sprayer, a haze drifting over the dinner table, a sharp chemical smell clinging to the curtains. Your mother sprayed it through the house every single summer. The Environmental Protection Agency banned DDT for most uses in 1972. The real reason it died wasn't the flies it killed. It was everything else it was quietly killing along the way. The next item never touched your kitchen. It touched your child's bare feet with a beam of invisible radiation. Number 3. The shoe-fitting fluoroscope, patented in the 1920s, common by the mid-1940s. A wooden cabinet let a child slide their feet inside, while an X-ray tube beamed straight up through the bones. What most people don't know is that there was no shielding and no limit on how many times a day a clerk could switch it on. Tens of thousands of these machines operated in shoe stores at their peak. A strange glow through the viewing window, the hum of a hidden motor. Your own feet lit up like something otherworldly. Your mother let you look twice because you begged her to. States began banning the machines through the 1950s, and the last ones disappeared by the early 1970s. The real reason it lasted so long was that nobody wanted to be the store that gave up the gimmick first. The next item wasn't sold to delight a child. It was sold to a mother who was simply, quietly, out of options. Number 4. Laudanum drops. A tincture of opium dissolved in alcohol, in continuous American use since the 1700s. What most people don't know is that by the 1940s, laudanum was technically restricted, but small-town pharmacists still filled it for regular customers with barely a question asked. Regulation on paper and regulation in practice were two very different things. An old glass bottle kept high on a shelf, the bitter taste hidden under sugar water, a spoon reserved only for medicine. Your grandmother kept it out of reach, but never out of use. Federal controls tightened it out of ordinary use through the 1950s and 60s. It didn't disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because working was never the same as being safe. The next item didn't come from a dusty bottle. It came wrapped in foil, sold as strength itself. Number 5. Strychnine tonic pills. Sold since the late 1800s as a nerve stimulant, still on some pharmacy shelves through the 1940s in tiny, carefully measured doses. What most people don't know is that strychnine, the same compound used in rat poison, was marketed as a pick-me-up for exhausted men. The dose separating a tonic from a fatal poisoning was frighteningly small. A small pill wrapped in paper. The bitter, metallic aftertaste. A father taking his tonic before a long shift. Your grandfather swore it was the only thing that got him through double shifts at the mill. Strychnine tonics quietly vanished from shelves through the 1950s as pharmacology caught up with folk medicine. The real reason it died was that belief was never the same as a safe margin. The next item wasn't swallowed at all. It was painted straight onto the scalp. Number 6. Lead acetate hair tonic. Sold under gradual darkening formulas from the 1800s onward, still common on drugstore shelves through the 1940s. What most people don't know is that these tonics worked because lead acetate literally deposited lead onto the hair shaft and scalp with every application. A bottle in the medicine cabinet meant a small, steady lead exposure with every combing. A comb kept by the bathroom sink. A faint metallic smell in the air. Gray temples fading darker week by week. Your grandfather combed it in every night before bed, certain it was harmless. Lead acetate hair dyes were finally banned from over-the-counter sale in the United States in 2018. The real reason it lasted so long was that nobody was looking for a slow poison in a bottle marketed as vanity. The next item wasn't for vanity. It was for a baby who couldn't stop crying. Number 7. Camphorated oil. A concentrated camphor and oil rub sold since the 1800s, a nursery staple by the 1940s for colds, croup, and fussy babies. What most people don't know is that concentrated camphorated oil was dangerously easy to mistake for cough syrup, and a single accidental swallow by an infant could cause seizures within minutes. The sharp, clean smell of a chest rub. A warm hand pressed gently against a small back. Pajamas rustling in a dim room. Your mother rubbed it on your chest every winter, humming while she worked. The Food and Drug Administration finally banned over-the-counter camphorated oil in the 1980s after decades of accidental infant poisonings. The real reason it survived so long was that a smell everyone trusted is the hardest thing to regulate away. The next item wasn't rubbed on skin. It was smoked on a doctor's own advice. Number 8. Asthma cigarettes. Sold since the 1800s, still stocked in 1940s pharmacies for asthma and bronchitis sufferers. What most people do not know is that these cigarettes were packed with plant compounds that relax airways, but are also potent, disorienting poisons in the wrong dose. Doctors genuinely recommended patients smoke them to clear the lungs. A wrapper stamped with a doctor's endorsement. Smoke curling in a dim kitchen. A wheeze finally easing after the first drag. Your grandmother lit one every time her chest went tight. Asthma cigarettes faded from shelves through the 1950s as inhaled treatments replaced them. The real reason they died was that working and being medicine turned out to be two very different claims. The next item was for the whole body, and it came from a mining chemical. Number 9. Fowler's Solution. An arsenic-based tonic first formulated in 1786, still dispensed by some pharmacists into the 1940s for skin conditions and general debility. What most people don't know is that Fowler's Solution was measured out in careful drops precisely because it was liquid arsenic, sold as a complexion and vitality tonic. Long-term users sometimes develop skin changes later recognized as early markers of arsenic-related cancer. A small dropper bottle behind the counter. A careful count of drops into water. A promise of clearer skin and steadier nerves. Your grandmother took hers every morning like clockwork, certain it kept her young. Fowler's Solution disappeared from routine use by the 1950s as its cancer risk became impossible to ignore. The real reason it died was decades of exposure finally catching up to a remedy nobody thought to question. The next item came from a tobacco company, endorsed by a man in a white coat. Number 10. Doctor-endorsed cigarette cartons. Sold at pharmacy counters through the 1930s and 40s, with ad campaigns built entirely around physician approval. What most people don't know is that tobacco companies surveyed doctors at medical conventions and turned the results into slogans claiming more doctors smoked their brand than any other. An ashtray sitting on the pharmacy counter. Smoke curling under the light. A carton passed over next to a roll of gauze. Your grandfather bought his pack the same place he bought his aspirin, without a second thought. The Surgeon General's 1964 report on smoking and health ended the era of doctor-endorsed cigarette advertising for good. The real reason it died was that the evidence finally became too large for even a trusted white coat to talk around. The next item was sold as a miracle in a bottle. Number 11. Hadacol Tonic. Launched in Louisiana in 1943, a vitamin tonic that spread across the South and into pharmacies nationwide by the late 1940s. What most people don't know is that Hadacol's real appeal wasn't the vitamins. It was the roughly 12% alcohol content, sold openly in dry counties where liquor itself was illegal. A bold label promising vim and vigor, a warm burn in the back of the throat, an evening ritual after supper. Your grandmother called it his medicine and never asked twice. Hadacol collapsed into bankruptcy in 1951 once the Federal Trade Commission forced its alcohol content onto the label. The real reason it died was that once people saw what was actually in the bottle, the magic went out of it. The next item was sold as a promise painted straight onto a young woman's face. Number 12. Arsenic complexion wafers. Sold since the 1890s, still found in some drugstores into the 1940s, promising a smoother, paler complexion. What most people don't know is that these wafers delivered a measured dose of arsenic directly into the bloodstream, marketed purely as a beauty aid. Women took them faithfully for months, chasing a fashionable pale complexion. A small case tucked inside a handbag. A wafer dissolved quietly before a night out. A compliment on clear skin that never asked how it was won. Your grandmother kept it on her vanity, close at hand. Arsenic complexion wafers faded from stores through the 1940s and 50s as the cancer risk became undeniable. The real reason it died was that the price of that beauty finally had a name. The next item was for pain, and it worked by quietly changing the color of the blood. Number 13. Antipyrine fever powders. Introduced in the 1880s, still sold in some pharmacies into the 1940s for headaches, fevers, and menstrual pain. What most people don't know is that antipyrine could quietly damage the blood's ability to carry oxygen, a condition doctors later named methemoglobinemia. A patient taking it faithfully for a monthly headache had no way of knowing their blood was slowly turning the wrong shade. A folded packet slipped across the counter. A bitter powder stirred into water. A headache fading within the hour. Your grandmother took hers every month without ever missing one. Antipyrine powders were gradually replaced by aspirin through the middle of the 20th century. The real reason it died was that a safer pill finally existed, and nobody kept buying the old one once they knew. Before we continue, tell me in the comments which one of these your own family kept in the medicine cabinet. Was it the Benzedrine inhaler your grandfather swore by, the DDT your mother sprayed every summer, or a bottle of Hadacol nobody talked about too loudly? I read every single one. Number 14. The Tricho system. A hair removal treatment using X-rays, offered at beauty parlors and pharmacy-adjacent salons from the 1920s through the mid-1940s. What most people don't know is that the Tricho system used unshielded X-ray exposure to destroy hair follicles, marketed to young women self-conscious about facial hair, with no formal radiology training required of operators. A dim treatment room, the low hum of an unfamiliar machine, a young woman lying still, told not to move an inch. Your grandmother went twice a month before her wedding, hoping for smooth, hairless skin. Tricho salons were shut down through the 1940s and 50s as radiation burns and later cancer surfaced. The real reason it died was that it worked exactly as advertised, at a cost nobody disclosed. The next item lived in the very same cabinet as a scraped knee. Number 15. Mercurochrome, a mercury-based antiseptic introduced in 1919, a staple of nearly every American medicine cabinet by the 1940s. What most people don't know is that mercurochrome's active ingredient was an organic mercury compound, absorbed in small amounts through broken skin with every scraped knee it treated. It left a bright, unmistakable stain, which parents took as proof it was working. The sting on a fresh scrape. A bright stain lingering on your knee for a week. A small applicator brush. Your mother dabbed it on every cut without a second thought. The Food and Drug Administration declared mercurochrome not generally recognized as safe in 1998. The real reason it took so long was that a product this familiar had simply become invisible to scrutiny. The next item was for a body someone was told simply wasn't thin enough. Number 16. Thyroid extract diet pills. Sold since the early 1900s, still dispensed by pharmacists in the 1940s to women wanting to lose weight quickly. What most people don't know is that these pills contained actual dried animal thyroid gland, artificially speeding up the metabolism of women whose thyroid function was completely normal to begin with. The weight came off, But so did muscle and bone density, silently, over months of use. A small tin of tablets tucked in a purse. A racing heartbeat blamed on nerves. A dress finally fitting the way she wanted. Your grandmother took them quietly before every family reunion, never mentioning it out loud. Thyroid extract diet pills faded from use through the 1960s as doctors documented their long-term harm. The real reason they died was that the cost of that thinness finally had a name. The next item was swallowed for a stomach that simply wouldn't settle. Number 17. Bismuth constipation powder. A heavy metal digestive remedy sold since the 1800s, a pharmacy shelf staple for constipation through the 1940s. What most people don't know is that bismuth, taken in the doses commonly recommended, could be absorbed into the bloodstream and cause nerve damage with prolonged use, a condition doctors later nicknamed bismuth encephalopathy. A chalky powder stirred into water. A gritty taste no sugar could quite hide. An evening ritual after a heavy supper. Your grandfather took a spoonful every night without ever missing one. Bismuth powders were reformulated and restricted through the middle of the 20th century once their neurological risks were documented. The real reason it died was decades of quiet trust outrunning the science that finally caught up to it. The next item was for a pregnancy, and the harm wouldn't surface for 20 years. Number 18. Diethylstilbestrol tablets. Approved in 1941, prescribed heavily by the mid-1940s to pregnant women believed to be at risk of miscarriage. What most people don't know is that this drug was handed to healthy pregnant women almost as a precaution, with doctors believing more estrogen simply meant a stronger pregnancy. It would take until the early 1970s for researchers to trace a rare vaginal cancer in young women directly back to their mothers taking this pill decades earlier. A small tablet handed across a doctor's desk. A quiet reassurance about a healthy pregnancy. A bottle placed gently in a purse. Your grandmother took hers faithfully, trusting every word her doctor told her. The Food and Drug Administration advised against this drug in pregnancy in 1971. The real reason it died was that the harm was built to hide for a generation before it ever showed itself. The next item came from the very same machine already trusted to check a broken bone. Number 19. Routine prenatal X-ray exams. Common by the 1940s, doctors used X-ray plates to check a baby's position before birth. What most people don't know is that expectant mothers were sometimes X-rayed multiple times over a single pregnancy with no sense that the radiation reached the baby. It would take until 1956 for a British researcher to link prenatal X-rays to a measurable rise in childhood cancer. A cold exam table. A nurse stepping back before the machine clicked on. A doctor's calm voice promising everything looked fine. Your grandmother was X-rayed twice during her first pregnancy, just to be sure. Routine prenatal X-rays were phased out through the late 1950s and 60s, once the cancer link was confirmed. The real reason it died was that confidence, it turned out, was never the same as proof. The next item was meant to make sure the mother never remembered the birth. Number 20. Twilight sleep injections. A childbirth technique using morphine and a second sedative, popular in American hospitals and home deliveries from the 1910s through the 1940s. What most people don't know is that twilight sleep didn't remove labor pain at all. It simply erased the mother's memory of it, leaving her conscious, thrashing, and often restrained during delivery while remembering none of it afterward. Restraints on a delivery bed. A darkened room kept deliberately silent. A blank missing memory where labor should have been. Your grandmother woke to a healthy baby and swore she remembered nothing at all. Twilight sleep fell out of favor through the 1950s and 60s as awake. Informed childbirth became the standard. The real reason it died was everything else it erased right along with the pain. The next item came from a mine, bottled and sold as pure vitality. Number 21. Radium water tonics. Popular from the 1920s through the early 1930s, with leftover stock still occasionally found on pharmacy shelves into the 1940s. What most people do not know is that bottled radium tonics were marketed as literally radioactive health drinks. The most infamous brand was linked to the gruesome, well-publicized death of a wealthy industrialist whose jaw and bones disintegrated from radiation poisoning. A bottle believed to glow faintly in low light. A confident promise of energy and youth. A morning ritual before breakfast. Your great-grandfather kept a bottle on the counter, certain it was the secret to his stamina. Radium tonics vanished from the market through the 1930s as poisoning cases mounted. The real reason it died was that the glow was never the miracle anyone believed it was. The next item was a pill meant only for sleep, sold with almost no questions asked. Number 22. Barbiturate sleeping pills. In wide use since the early 1900s, technically requiring a prescription after 1938, but still dispensed loosely by many small-town pharmacists through the 1940s. What most people do not know is that refills were often handed over the counter with a nod and a familiar face, no real oversight involved. Hospital reports of acute barbiturate poisoning had already doubled between the 1930s and the 1940s. A small bottle rattling in a nightstand drawer. A single pill washed down with water before bed. A ritual after a long, exhausting day. Your grandmother kept hers within arm's reach, just in case sleep would not come easily. Regulation tightened sharply through the 1950s and 60s as overdose deaths climbed. The real reason it died was that the law on paper and the pharmacy counter had never actually matched. The next item was meant to numb a headache, and it worked by way of a vapor. Number 23. Chloroform headache inhalers. Small vial inhalers sold since the late 1800s, still stocked in some 1940s pharmacies for migraines and nerve pain. What most people don't know is that chloroform, the same compound once used to knock patients unconscious for surgery, was sold in a small enough dose to simply dull a headache, with users controlling their own exposure by how deeply they inhaled. A small vial wrapped in cloth. A sweet, heavy smell filling the room. A held breath before the ache finally faded. Your grandmother kept hers in her handbag for the worst afternoons. Chloroform was pulled from consumer products through the 1970s once its cancer and cardiac risks were firmly established. The real reason it died was everything else it was quietly doing on the way to curing the headache. The next item wasn't really for the mother who bought it. It was for the baby who couldn't stop crying. Number 24. Paregoric. A camphorated tincture of opium sold since the 1700s, a pharmacy staple through the 1940s for infant colic, teething, and diarrhea. What most people do not know is that paregoric was diluted specifically to be given, drop by drop, to infants and toddlers, one of the only widely available opium products marketed directly for babies. A bottle warmed by a mother's hand. The bitter taste masked in sugar water. A crying baby finally, quietly, still. Your grandmother swore by it every time a tooth was coming in. Paregoric was restricted to prescription-only status through the middle of the 20th century and quietly vanished from home use by the 1970s. The real reason it died was that it worked exactly as advertised, on an infant's body that was never built to carry it. The next item was gentler in name only, and it carried the same secret every bottle before it had carried. Number 25. Infant Soothing Syrup. Marketed under trusted family names since the 1840s, still recognizable on some pharmacy shelves into the 1940s, sold specifically for teething babies. What most people don't know is that these syrups contained morphine in doses meant for a full-grown adult, given instead by the spoonful to infants whose tiny bodies had no way to safely process it. The bottle promised a peaceful night for exhausted parents, and it delivered exactly that. Because the baby wasn't sleeping, it was sedated. Some infants who received a slightly too generous dose never woke up at all. A soft label with a sleeping baby printed on the front. A single reassuring spoonful before bed. A house finally, blessedly silent. Your great-grandmother measured it out every night, certain she was doing exactly what a good mother should. The American Medical Association condemned soothing syrups outright in 1911, and public pressure finally forced them from pharmacy shelves for good. The real reason it died was that trust was the only ingredient the label was ever really selling. These 25 things didn't just fall out of fashion. They were trusted, sold, and quietly withdrawn only after they had already cost someone something. Which one of these sat in your own family's medicine cabinet? Not just the bottle, the moment around it. The mother measuring out a spoonful in a dim kitchen, certain she was doing right by her child. What does remembering that bring back for you? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe, because there is a lot more of this country left to remember.